I was always second to my stepbrother, until he decided I should fund his lavish lifestyle, and then I always knew Jesse would come back eventually. The way those types do, like a bad habit or a storm that never quite finishes blowing through. You tell yourself the worst of it has passed, that you've survived it, but then you wake up one day and the clouds are right there again, hanging heavy and loud. That's exactly what it felt like when my mom called me last month and said, "Jesse's coming to stay with us for a while. He just needs a little time to get back on his feet." That phrase, a little time, I've learned it means until he drains us dry. I'm 29. I've built a stable, quiet life in Portland with my girlfriend Sophie, who's everything Jesse isn't. Empathetic, grounded, real. I have a decent job in logistics, nothing glamorous, but it pays well and doesn't give me anxiety every time my phone rings. I worked my way through college with no handouts, no special allowances. Jesse, on the other hand, coasted through life on everyone else's gas, charming his way past responsibility like it was a talent. When I told my mom I didn't think it was a good idea for Jesse to come back, she just sighed and said, "You always think the worst of him." And maybe I do, but that's only because I know what he's like when the mask slips. The last time I saw Jesse was 3 years ago at our stepdad Mark's birthday. Jesse showed up late, reeking of weed and something expensive, wearing clothes that didn't fit the version of him I remembered. He barely said 2 words to me, spent the evening bragging to cousins about the startup he was launching in LA. I found out later he'd been working at a nightclub, sleeping on someone's couch, and the startup was just him trying to sell weed-infused skincare products on Etsy. The whole thing fell apart within months. So when he came back last month, I wasn't surprised to hear he'd burned every bridge out west. The story was vague, something about opportunities drying up and needing space to refocus. Jesse's 27 now, but it's like he stopped emotionally aging at 19. He still talks in buzzwords, like he's in a constant job interview that never ends. Within a week of being back, he was already circling around my life like a vulture spotting fresh roadkill. It started subtly. He texted me one evening asking if we could grab lunch, just to catch up. Sophie warned me not to go, but I thought maybe if I gave him this one thing, he'd leave us alone. We met at this trendy sandwich place near my office. He looked put together, in that curated way that reeks of borrowed money. New jacket, designer shoes, but the kind of eyes that twitch when the check comes. He didn't order anything, just said he wasn't hungry, then spent 45 minutes talking about how toxic LA was and how hard it is to find real friends when you've got something people want. I didn't ask what he meant by that, but I had a pretty good idea it wasn't his personality. Eventually, he shifted gears and dropped the real reason for the meetup. He needed help. Not just emotional support, but financial. Just a few grand to get this new project off the ground. He said like it was a favor I'd be honored to fulfill. He had this pitch prepared, handwritten notes, a mock website on his phone, even a business plan he'd clearly Googled 5 minutes before. I told him no. I told him that I had a mortgage, student loans, and a partner who would rightfully murder me if I handed over money to a man who once tried to sell my PlayStation in high school to fund a trip to Burning Man. Jesse didn't take it well. He laughed at first, then leaned back and said, "You always were selfish, Tyler. You pretend like you're so noble, but you've always hated me having anything you didn't earn." That line hit like a slap, not because it was true, but because it was so obviously what he believed. In Jesse's mind, the world owes him because someone, somewhere, told him once that he was special, and everyone else is just background noise. I thought that would be the end of it, but of course, it wasn't. The next day, Mom called me in tears. Jesse had told her I refused to help him in his time of need, and that I mocked him. She didn't even ask for my side, just launched into how disappointed she was. "How? You have so much, Tyler, and Jesse just needs a little support." I told her he was trying to scam me. She said, "That's a horrible thing to say about your brother." I didn't respond, because she was right. In a way, saying it out loud did feel horrible. But that didn't make it less true. Things escalated fast. Sophie found Jesse snooping around in our garage the following weekend. He claimed he was looking for tools, and that Mom said it was okay. He smiled like it was all harmless, but Sophie was rattled. She told me she caught him glancing at my files, the ones I keep for taxes and work stuff. I started locking the office after that. A week later, Jesse posted photos on Instagram, dinners at high-end restaurants, a new watch, drinks on a rooftop bar. His caption read, "Back in the game. Big moves coming." I stared at that post for 10 minutes before realizing what it meant. He was still playing his game, still trying to build an empire on other people's backs. That night, I told Sophie everything about the lunch, the ask, the manipulation. She sat there quietly, nodding, then said, "I don't think he's done with you yet." She was right, because 2 days later, Jesse showed up at my job. He waltzed into the front office like he owned the place, said he was just there to say hi. But I knew better. My boss later mentioned he'd overheard Jesse talking to one of the clerks about my salary, asking if I got bonuses, just curious. The implication was obvious. He was fishing, trying to figure out just how much I could give him if he leaned hard enough. I drove home that night, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I knew what was coming. Jesse wasn't just looking for a loan anymore. He was planning something. And I had a sick feeling in my stomach that whatever it wasn't just about money anymore. It was personal. It always had been. Jesse wasn't just being a parasite anymore. He was actively digging into my life like he had some kind of blueprint for dismantling it. I thought declining his request would draw a line, but instead, it just marked me as the final frontier in his bullshit conquest. 2 days after he showed up at my job, my mom called again. She had that apologetic tone she uses when she's already made a decision on my behalf. "I told Jesse he could stay with you and Sophie for a week," she said, like we were a spare room on Airbnb. I nearly dropped the phone. "Absolutely not," I told her, pacing the length of the living room like a hostage negotiator. "He's not coming here, Mom." "That's a hard no." She sighed like I was the difficult one, then mumbled something about Jesse having nowhere else to go and just needing some family support. It was like she hadn't heard a single thing I'd said the last 3 weeks. I told Sophie about the conversation and expected her to lose it, but she didn't. She just looked at me and said, "You need to set the boundary yourself, Tyler. Not with me. Not with me playing bad cop. This is your line to hold." And she was right, which somehow made it feel worse. That night, Jesse showed up anyway. I swear I never gave him our address. But there he was, standing on the porch with a gym bag, and that same oily smile that made people think he was harmless. "Hey, bro," he said like we were old college roommates and not two barely civilized relatives circling a blood feud. "Mom said I could crash here for a few days. Just need to get back on my feet." Sophie stood behind me, arms crossed, and I felt like I was stuck between two worlds. Part of me wanted to slam the door, and the other part was still that 15-year-old kid who wanted his mom to stop looking disappointed. I let him in. That was my first real mistake. Within an hour, he was shirtless on our couch, flipping through Netflix like he paid rent. He made jokes about our minimalist decor, asked if Sophie was always so intense, and offered to help with dinner by suggesting we postmate it. The second we sat down to eat, he launched into another pitch. "It's different this time," he said, shoveling food into his mouth like he hadn't eaten in days. "It's a social crypto platform, not just tokens or NFTs. It's going to disrupt the market. But I need a little starting capital to secure some early partnerships." I asked him if these partnerships had names. He said they were in the works. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Jesse, this is a scam. If it's not one yet, it's about to be." He didn't even blink. "That's rich coming from a guy who coordinates warehouse shipments for a living," he said, smirking. I felt my hands tighten around my fork, and Sophie placed hers gently on my leg under the table, like she could see me slipping into something ugly. Later that night, Sophie found him in our office again. She said he was messing with the filing cabinet, claimed he was looking for scratch paper. He left his phone open on the desk, accidentally, maybe, or maybe just arrogant. She noticed it because it was buzzing nonstop. Group chats, Telegram messages, crypto icons. One name stuck out to her, Zane. That name meant nothing to me, but it set off a chain reaction. I told Connor about it the next day. Connor's been my best friend since freshman year, the kind of guy who once helped me move apartments in the middle of a snowstorm without complaining. He also happens to be good with digging up digital dirt. Within 2 hours, he called me back and said, "You're going to want to sit down." Turns out, Zane was one of Jesse's known aliases online. Under that name, he'd been promoting pump-and-dump coin schemes, scamming people in crypto forums, and even had a few angry Reddit threads dedicated to exposing him. I didn't know whether to be angry or impressed at the depth of his audacity. But mostly, I was scared, because if he was using our address, our network, our names to prop up this garbage, we were complicit by association. Connor dug deeper and found a shell company registered in Oregon under Jesse's alias. Guess what address he listed as business HQ? Ours. I confronted him that night. He was sitting on our balcony, vaping and blasting music from his phone. "We need to talk," I said, holding the printed screenshot of the registry filing. He didn't even look surprised. "It's just a placeholder," he said, like using our home address for a scam company was no big deal. I was going to change it once things got real. I told him to pack his shit. He didn't move. Instead, he stood up and got real close, too close, and whispered, "You really want to do that? You think Sophie wants to know what you were up to your sophomore year of college?" My stomach dropped. He smiled. "Yeah, I know all about it. Your little problem with that teaching assistant. Funny how that never came up in your happy couple speeches." My legs felt like concrete. I hadn't even told Sophie that story. Jesse must have dug into my old emails, my private files. That was the moment I realized Jesse wasn't just a leech. He was a bomb, waiting for the right moment to blow everything apart. I told Sophie everything. All of it. The TA, the stupid choices I made when I was 20, the desperate attempt to fix it before it blew up my scholarship. I expected her to look at me like I was someone she didn't know. Instead, she sat on the floor with me in silence for nearly 10 minutes before saying, "He's dangerous, Tyler. Not just manipulative, actually dangerous. You need to get him out. Not later. Now." So I called my mom. She cried, told me I was being dramatic, told me Jesse just needed love. I told her he needed a lawyer. She hung up on me. I didn't care. I made Jesse leave that night. Packed his bag myself. He didn't resist. He just smiled that same tight, condescending smile and said, "You're gonna regret this. People like me always bounce back. People like you just survive." He was gone by morning. But I knew this wasn't over. Because 3 days later, someone tried to access my work account from an unknown location in San Diego. The IP address was flagged for suspicious activity. The security team locked everything down. That's when I knew he wasn't finished. The message from IT hit my inbox at 8:17 a.m. and instantly made my chest go tight. Unusual login attempt detected. Your account has been locked as a security precaution. Please contact your supervisor. At first, I thought it was phishing spam. Then I checked the IP address they flagged. San Diego, Jesse's last known location. I hadn't told him anything about my work system, but somehow, he had enough to try and force his way in. I knew then that this wasn't over because it was never about the money in the first place. It was about control. Sophie found me staring at the screen with my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. I showed her the email, and for the first time since this whole mess began, she didn't say anything. She just walked over and started packing a bag. When I asked what she was doing, she said, "We're going to Connor's for a few days. You need a buffer. He needs to think you're not isolated." That part of her, calm under pressure, fiercely logical when everything starts to collapse, is one of the reasons I love her. And it's why I knew I had to finally stop pretending this was something I could fix by just ignoring Jesse long enough. We stayed at Connor's place for 3 nights. In that time, I filed a police report, froze my credit, and placed a fraud alert with every financial institution I had ties to. Connor, of course, went a step further. He dug into Jesse's online activity, this time following some of the crypto wallet addresses that had been tied to Zane's shady projects. What he found made my stomach twist. At least 3 of the wallets had been flagged in blockchain scam watch groups. One had even been involved in a pump scheme that cost some poor guy in Toronto his entire savings. The name listed under the original registry? My middle name. Jesse was using fragments of my identity in multiple places. Not just a mailing address or a loose password. Full-blown identity theft. We couldn't prove all of it immediately, but it was enough to light a fire under me. I contacted a lawyer. He wasn't cheap, but after I showed him the registry data and screenshots, he told me I had a decent shot at getting Jesse investigated, especially if he tried to monetize any of the shell companies. The problem, he warned, was that Jesse was smart about staying just behind the line, floating in that gray area where things are suspicious but not illegal enough to act quickly. That's when things started to shift in ways I didn't expect. My mom called me out of the blue, crying again. But this time, it wasn't about Jesse's sob story or my failure to be a good brother. It was because Jesse had asked her to co-sign a loan using her retirement savings as collateral. When she refused, he told her that he'd find another way and hung up on her. She told me all of this in a shaky voice, like she'd just realized he was capable of actual harm. "I don't know who he is anymore," she whispered. "I don't think I ever did." I didn't say anything, because the truth is, I've known who he is since I was 12 years old. When our parents got married, Jesse had this way of taking up space, emotionally and physically. He was always louder, more charming, more reckless. But everyone loved him anyway. I got straight A's, stayed out of trouble, got into college on my own. Jesse skipped class, crashed his first car, got caught shoplifting once. But whenever something blew up, it was always somehow spun into a phase or a rough patch. I was the control group, reliable, predictable, and invisible. It didn't hit me how deep that resentment ran until I watched my mom start to realize it herself. A few days later, Jesse made another move. He emailed me a copy of a contract, a legally binding agreement that outlined repayment terms for a $20,000 loan he claimed I'd promised him. It was written in slick legalese, with my name typed in neatly at the bottom and a digital signature attached. Only problem was, I'd never signed it. Sophie immediately pointed out the date on the document was the same day Jesse had come over with sushi to make peace. I remembered because he spilled wasabi on the couch and made a joke about how I was too uptight to enjoy free food. Apparently, while I was in the bathroom, he'd accessed my home office and pulled my saved e-signature file. He wasn't just improvising anymore. He had a plan. Connor and I brought everything to my lawyer. It turned out Jesse had also created a bogus email thread confirming my willingness to invest. He'd been slowly building a paper trail to make it look like I was a silent partner in his business. All of it pointed to a future play, one where he could blame me when things went south or worse, sue me if he needed more money. The lawyer advised us to stay ahead of him. "He's not trying to destroy you," he said. "He's trying to tie himself to your success so tightly that when he goes down, you go with him." That sentence hit harder than I expected. Sophie and I went back home eventually, but nothing felt normal. I changed every password, bought a safe, started using two-factor authentication for even the dumbest apps. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. I couldn't sleep without checking the locks 3 times. Jesse was hundreds of miles away, but he was still in our lives, lurking, waiting, always one bad decision away from crashing everything I'd worked for. Then one night, Sophie got a call from her sister in New York. Apparently, someone had messaged her anonymously with screenshots from a group chat claiming I was under investigation for fraud. The screenshots had my name, my photo, and links to those shady crypto pages Jesse had built using pieces of my identity. I had to sit Sophie down again, this time not to confess anything, but to reassure her that none of it was real. She believed me, but it still broke something in her. This constant weight of being hunted, of having to defend the man she loved from a ghost wearing his face. We realized then that it wasn't enough to just protect ourselves. We had to expose him. Connor and I put together a file, every address, alias, and post we could find tied to Jesse's crypto scam. We included the screenshots, the forged documents, the identity spoofing. We submitted it to an online watchdog group that specializes in exposing fraudsters. They were slow to respond at first, but once they saw the fake contract, they took it seriously. One of their admins messaged me privately and said, "This guy's done this before. You're not his first, but you could be the last." That message gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. The first message from the Fraud Watch forum came in just after midnight. while I was lying awake listening to the distant sound of sirens and Sophie's breathing beside me. Confirmed, it said. We've matched 3 aliases to 1 identity. Multiple victims. Coordinating contact. It was surreal, reading those words. Not just because it proved Jesse had done this before, but because it finally meant someone else believed me. Someone beyond Sophie and Connor. Someone who hadn't grown up being told Jesse was just misunderstood or going through a phase. Someone who looked at the evidence and called it what it was, malicious fraud. The next day was chaos in slow motion. I spent my lunch break on the phone with a moderator named Kellen, a cybersecurity consultant who worked with online scam survivors. He confirmed Jesse had been running a decentralized investment ring under the name Zane for almost a year. The structure was slick: invite-only Discord servers, limited-time investments, anonymous deposits into what looked like a rotating series of wallets. Most people never saw a dime again, but by the time they realized what happened, Jesse was already gone. A new username, a new scheme, same playbook. Kellen said they'd flagged him before, but never had enough data to make it stick, until now. With the forged contract, the linked addresses, and screenshots of Jesse's burner accounts, they could finally start connecting the dots in public. You'll want to brace yourself, Kellen said before we hung up. Once we go live, it's going to escalate fast. I wasn't sure what that meant at first, but I found out less than 24 hours later. The expose post dropped on a Saturday morning, complete with Jesse's photo, cross-referenced aliases, contact information, and victim testimony. It spread like wildfire across Reddit, X, and a couple niche finance forums. One victim claimed Jesse convinced her to invest $8,000 for early access tokens, and then blocked her the next day. Another said he'd actually met Jesse in person at a crypto meetup in Las Vegas, where Jesse pitched a revolutionary decentralized platform before disappearing mid-conference. There were screenshots of fake balance sheets, forged investor chats, and even voice messages that matched Jesse's smirking drawl perfectly. By that afternoon, Jesse's name was trending in several crypto scam watch lists. And that's when he reached out. I hadn't heard from him since I kicked him out, but suddenly my phone exploded with calls from a blocked number. I let them go to voicemail, expecting threats, but what I heard was worse. He was calm. Too calm. "Tyler," he said, voice slow and measured like he'd rehearsed every word. "I know what you did. You think you've won, but all you've done is drag the family name through the dirt. You think exposing me clears your name? I've got insurance. You go down with me. Believe that. Insurance." That word rattled around in my brain for hours. Connor came over that evening, visibly unsettled. "He's bluffing," he said, but I wasn't convinced. Jesse didn't bluff unless he had a backup plan, and I knew him well enough to know he wouldn't go down quietly. Sophie started checking all our digital locks again, banking apps, cloud storage, even our Wi-Fi router. It felt like we were being stalked by a phantom version of someone I used to know. Then came the email, sent from a burner Gmail account, addressed to me, my boss, and 2 regional VPs. Attached were forged documents that made it look like I'd been funneling funds through a client back channel. The attachments were clean, professionally faked. Whoever helped Jesse put them together knew what they were doing. For 10 terrifying minutes, I thought I was going to lose my job, my reputation, everything. But then I noticed a single error in the metadata. One file had been saved under the alias ZaneDev_alpha. I called my boss immediately, explained everything in detail, sent him the link to the expose thread, the screenshots, the legal complaint, even the lawyer's email. I expected skepticism or a polite, "We'll review this." But he just said, "This is the guy who called the office pretending to be your financial advisor last week, isn't it?" Apparently, Jesse had already been testing the waters, planting seeds of doubt. Luckily, my boss wasn't an idiot. We forwarded the email chain to legal. I thought maybe that would be the end of it, or at least the beginning of the end. I was wrong. The next morning, Sophie found something in the guest bedroom closet, wedged behind the water heater, buried under an old pile of paint cans. A burner phone, still active, still warm. She stared at it like it was a live grenade. We knew instantly it was Jesse's. He must have hidden it during the few days he stayed with us. When we opened it, the truth hit like a gut punch. Dozens of text messages, many of them containing intimate details about me, Sophie, even Connor. Conversations Jesse had clearly recorded. Photos of our house, our files, receipts, even screenshots of Sophie's therapy schedule. He'd been spying on us the entire time. Sophie broke down for the first time since this started. Not crying, sobbing. That deep, helpless kind that makes you realize just how much damage someone else can do when they treat your life like a tool. I held her on the kitchen floor for almost an hour, heart racing, mouth dry, mind already spiraling toward retaliation. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done. Done defending. Done waiting. Done playing defense. I gave the burner phone to Connor and said, "Can you trap him with this?" He nodded once and said, "Yeah, I think we can make it end." The plan was simple but risky. Connor built a fake message string using Jesse's own writing patterns and vocabulary. We posed as a potential investor looking to buy into one of his defunct platforms. We used a real crypto wallet, emptied of funds but active, so Jesse could verify its legitimacy. The goal was to bait him into making an incriminating statement or transaction. It took 2 days and 4 fake identities, but finally, he bit. He responded with a pitch almost identical to the one he gave me during that sushi dinner. Connor recorded everything. The final piece came in the form of a voice note Jesse sent to our fake profile. "Keep this quiet," he said, "and I'll throw in a referral bonus. But I need you to wire the holding deposit by Monday. Don't talk to anyone, especially not the SEC. They're watching." That was it. We handed everything over to the feds. Sophie and I stayed at Connor's that night, the weight of months finally breaking loose from my spine. I still don't know how Jesse thought this would end, but for the first time, I was ready to find out. The arrest didn't happen like it does in movies. There was no dramatic knock at the door, no officers bursting and shouting Jesse's full name like some SWAT team episode. It was quieter, stranger, just an email from our contact at the fraud watchdog group saying, "He's in custody. San Diego PD coordinated with Federal Cybercrime Unit. You'll get a call soon." I stared at the screen for a full minute before showing it to Sophie, whose face didn't register relief, just cautious disbelief. After everything he'd done, it felt surreal that someone else had finally pulled the trigger. The next 48 hours were a blur of calls. My lawyer, Connor, the case officer assigned to investigate Jesse's involvement in multiple financial fraud schemes. Apparently, our digital sting had connected him not only to the pump-and-dump scams, but to wire fraud, identity theft, and unlawful surveillance. That last one was tied to the burner phone Sophie found. He hadn't just taken pictures. He'd recorded audio in our home, and the timestamps proved he'd done it without consent while we were asleep. I felt sick when I heard that part, and even now, months later, the idea that he listened to our private conversations still makes my skin crawl. The officer asked if I wanted to press separate charges. It would be an uphill battle, especially since Jesse hadn't profited directly from recording us, but he'd violated federal privacy laws. I asked Sophie. She didn't even hesitate. "Yes," she said. "He didn't just try to ruin your life. He used mine to do it." So we did. The paperwork was long and full of language that made me feel like I was signing away pieces of my trauma, but it felt good. Like agency. Like control. Meanwhile, the ripple effects were immediate. My mom called again, this time not crying, just numb. She said Jesse had called her from holding, begged for help, and when she said she couldn't, he turned on her. Said it was her fault he was in this mess, that she'd never protected him from me. That last part stung more than I expected. Even in the end, Jesse was rewriting the narrative in his favor. I don't know why that still surprised me. Mark didn't call. He sent me a single email 2 days later. It just said, "You did what needed to be done. I'm sorry it had to be you." I didn't reply. I didn't trust myself not to type something I'd regret. The man spent years letting Jesse dig deeper and deeper into delusion while calling it ambition. He could sit in his silence now. The investigation kept building momentum. More victims came forward. The crypto community lit up with posts dissecting every project Jesse had touched in the last 2 years. One guy from Nebraska shared screenshots showing Jesse had used an image of my face, edited slightly, but still clearly me, in a fake testimonial for a scam token. I laughed when I saw it, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd it crossed into dark comedy territory. He couldn't destroy me with truth, so he tried to destroy me with lies instead. It took 4 months, but the feds filed formal charges. Jesse pled not guilty, of course. Claimed it was all a misunderstanding, a witch hunt led by a jealous brother with unresolved family resentment. His lawyer even tried to paint me as unstable, bringing up old academic records and private therapy notes from when I was 19. We don't know how they got access to that stuff. Probably part of Jesse's quiet hacks when he lived with us, but my lawyer tore it apart in court. This isn't a story about family drama, he said. It's about premeditated financial abuse. Jesse's bail was denied. And just like that, the storm began to fade. Sophie and I spent the first month after the arraignment doing nothing exciting. We cooked slow meals. We slept with the windows open. We started a small herb garden on the balcony. These little rituals, so boring on paper, were like oxygen to us. When someone spends months trying to rip your life apart, there's nothing sweeter than the quiet certainty of a normal day. I wish I could say my relationship with my mom healed overnight. It didn't. She still flinches when I bring Jessie up, and I still hear the disappointment in her voice when she tries to defend her blindness. But there's honesty now, and honesty is more than we had before. She sent Sophie a handwritten letter apologizing for not believing her. That mattered more than she probably realizes. Connor and I still talk almost daily. We joke that he deserves a cut of whatever book deal might come out of this someday. He says he's just glad I listened when it mattered. So am I. I spent too many years thinking protecting myself meant keeping quiet. Now I know better. Last week, we finally moved. New city, new apartment, new routine. Sophie's practice expanded to include trauma therapy, and she's already got a wait list. I started a consulting gig that lets me work from home. No more warehouses. No more uninvited lunches from Jesse. No more living like I'm one wrong move away from losing everything I built. I think what still haunts me most isn't what Jesse did. It's how many times I doubted my own instincts because someone told me I was being cruel. That's how manipulation works. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It waits. It frames every resistance as a betrayal and every boundary as an attack. But the truth is, protecting yourself isn't cruelty. It's survival. Sometimes I still get emails from people who knew Jesse, old high school friends, distant relatives, people who got his shiny pitch deck once and are just now realizing how close they came to disaster. They usually say the same thing. He always seemed like he had it together. That's the part Jesse mastered best, looking like something he never had to be. I used to wonder what kind of person that made me. The brother who reported his own blood, who stood in court and testified against someone he once shared bunk beds with at age 11. But now I see it differently. Jesse wasn't just my stepbrother. He was a threat. And when someone threatens your life, your real life, the one you built with sweat and years and honesty, you have to choose. You either let them rewrite your story or you write it yourself. So here it is. This is my version. And this time, it's mine alone.